This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, probably the most prominent part of the Parsha is Kriyas Yamsuf. We may have certain presumptions and ideas about exactly what took place at Kriyas Yamsuf and what Kriyas Yamsuf looked like. And what we're here today is to shatter all of your illusions. And we're going to learn that Kriyas Yamsuf may not exactly have happened the way you always were taught or you always thought. Okay, so we'll start with this. The Ksav HaKabbalah brings a very interesting diak. In Tanakh, when you talk about those who go to the sea, usually the word used is they go down to the sea. Right? Yardei Hayam Banios. And yet when it comes to Kriyas Yamsuf, what does the pasuk say? Vayavayu. Vayavayu, they came. Now the word Vayavayu, they came, seems to be you come into a room. You come into a level playing field. You don't come into a sea. You go down into the sea. Yeah. So why does it say Vayavayu b'toich hayam? The Ksav HaKabbalah is going to bring down for us the comment of somebody who a biblical commentator that he quotes by the name of Rav Naftali Wiesel.
Schoenfeld wants to come down in about 5 minutes to talk to them.
In the middle of this year? Let him do it at the end. No?
At the end of this year? Okay.
B'chama Mekoymos, in many places, Yeshamish ala hoylech b'yam lashon yirida. The Torah uses the expression about those who go down to the sea in terms of going down to the sea. Kamo, for instance, Yardei Hayam Ba'anios v'chadamar. For instance, those who go down to the sea, or what? Okay, to go down. V'havelei lomar gam kan lashon v'yerdu. It should have used that expression over here that they went down. V'omar lashon v'yavayu, and instead it says they came. And the reason is Chumash Kasav Rav Naftali Wiesel. This is a commentator that the Ksav HaKabbalah quotes. Ki lo haya b'kiyas yamsuf al derech hamaforsam. The splitting of the sea was not the way you think it was. Not the derech hamaforsam. Derech hamaforsam is, the way they teach in nursery school. It's not the typical way.
It was I read in the paper that scientifically they discovered by the winds, the strength of the winds, how they separated to verify the event
so we're going to see how did the water split. We always thought it was a miracle that the water split. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't a miracle. Why not? Ki'im hifli Hashem. I'll tell you what the miracle is, he says. Ki'im hifli Hashem la'asais. You know what wonder Hashem did? Shahatahom, because the seabed, shehu karkas hayam, which is the floor of the sea, shahamayim shoichvin alav, that the water rests on, right? The seabed. Now, if one would go into a sea, it would be like going into a big valley, a deep valley, right? As you go into the sea, the seabed gets lower and lower until you get to the middle of the sea, and then it gets higher, right? The water level is the same. It's the seabed that gets deeper. You know what Hashem did? What Hashem did was He raised up the seabed. Shamayim shechalav. Higbiya Hashem oisai. God lifted it up. Ma'at ma'at memakaymai. Binasa lamala. And it was lifted upward. Ad shaniya b'mashve echad im sfas hayam. Till the seabed was equal to the seashore. In other words, it's not that the Jews went. It's not what happened was not what you learned. It's not that God split the sea and we went down, and back up. What happened was God lifted up the seabed until the seabed was equal to the seashore. What's going to happen if God lifts up the seabed? The water is going to rise. So now the water is standing in the air like a mountain. Now,
what's the nafkamina? How was it? On either side.
So 1 second. Now, if God is going to lift up the seabed, what's going to happen to the water? Naturally, the water is going to fall away and split. So the splitting of the water was not the miracle at all. It was the lifting up of the seabed that was the miracle. The splitting of the sea was natural.
Where did that water go?
Now, let's see. Okay? Now the problem is, a seabed is muddy, murky, it's not firm. The part of the seabed, that came up, it became firm and dry. That was a paven path for Tov Laver Olav, and it became good to go on. When the seabed rose up, and it became like a paved road, without any lower high places, where's the water going to go? If the bed has... Until now, the water just sits there in a tub, in a big bowl. But now that the ground is flattened, where's the water going to go? So it's going to disperse. Okay. Now there's a second miracle. Because where is the water going to go to? If just left up to the natural course, the water is just going to disperse here and there and everywhere. Okay. Now the water had to split. And to divide, because you have this new dry land that appeared in between. By the way, they once asked the Vilna Gaon, we know that Kriyas Yamsuf was not just a miracle that occurred at that time, but it was already preordained from the time that Hashem created the world. Hashem, it says, Vayashav hayam le'esanai letnai harishon. When the river went back, after Kriyas Yamsuf, it says the river started flowing again, the sea started flowing again. So Chazal Darshan, that Hashem made a stipulation with the sea when Hashem created it that it's going to split for the Jewish people. So they asked the Vilna Gaon, where in Bereshis do we see that Hashem made a stipulation, made a t'nai with the Yam that it should split? The Vilna Gaon said the very Parsha. It says, Yikavu hamayim lemakom echad v'seira'eh hayabasha. It says, let all the water gather into one place and let the dry land appear. It says the Vilna Gaon, if all the water is going to gather into one place, of course the dry land is going to appear. Why would the pasuk have to say, let all the water gather to one place and let the dry land appear? If the water is in one place, then the dry land's in the other place. Says the Vilna Gaon, when the pasuk says, let the dry land appear, let the dry land appear in the water. When was that? Kriyas Yamsuf. In other words, the pasuk in Bereshis that says, Yikav Amayim b'makom echad v'seirah hayabasha. It's not v'seirah hayabasha where the water is not. It's v'seirah hayabasha where the water is.
What about the Yarden and Yeshua?
That also. But we don't find that expression that Hashem made a t'nai. We find by Kriyas Yamsuf that there was a t'nai from Bereshis.
Why was there a t'nai for one and not the other?
What was the sea? What was the river? What was wrong?
All right, there is a
Reb Shimon Sofer writes. Reb Shimon Sofer writes that when it comes to miracles, the first time it happens is the biggest deal. Once it happens in the world, it's already possible. Okay.
Rabbi, what about Amayim Lahem Choma?
Oh, so we're going to get to that. Okay, good. Good. Okay. V'zeh inyan tivi. The splitting of the Yamsuf was natural. The miracle was the ground lifting up. Once the water splits, it's natural. However, ilu hayu nigarim kedarka mekafiteveim. If the water would just drag along as its nature, yarutzin el she'eres hayam, it would go to the rest of the sea. Miyamin umismal hadar sheneschadesh v'chein lefnim v'la'achar al sfas hayam. It would go everywhere. Therefore, God acted wondrously a second time. Lasois shehamayim shenagbohu al yedei hatahom shetzafu lamala. What was the miracle? That the water that was raised up on the seabed that floated upward, lainasu lefnim v'la'achar. It didn't go this way. It didn't go that way. V'lo l'she'eres hayam kedakim. Didn't flow to the rest. Didn't go to the Atlantic or the Pacific or the Indian. Ela nechzu l'shtayim. It was divided into two. V'nermu zu al zu ba'avir. And it was piled one on top of each other in the air. Mishnei tzidei haderech hachadash, on both sides of the new road.
So there was one corridor, not 12.
he's not getting involved in the pathways. But in general, there was one split. Were there separate avenues?
So that was one avenue that the...
It might have 12 times. The other was 12, you would say it happened 12 times.
Yeah, but we're not, he's lo nichnas. So in other words, miracle number one was what? The rising of the seabed. The splitting of the water was not miraculous at all. The splitting of the water was not miraculous. What was miraculous is once the water split, it could disperse everywhere. But the miracle was that now the water stood up like two walls. So if one were to imagine Kriyas Yamsuf, you would not picture Bnei Yisrael going down into the sea and coming up. They walked on a level playing field with the water suspended in the air on both sides. Like two walls, exactly what it says in the Psukim. Nitzvu ch'mayneid. They stood like a wall. V'hamayim lahem chayma. We always think, what do you mean v'hamayim lahem chayma? They were down there and the water was up. No, they weren't down anywhere. They were walking on flat land equal to the shore. The water literally piled up high. So there are two miracles. One, the rising of the seabed. Two, the piling of the water. But the splitting of the sea, that was natural. Where does he get that from? Look what he says. V'hayazet. Now,
Really split. I mean, the way we're describing it, the sea didn't split. The seabed rose to the level of the shore, so they just walked. The Bnei Israel walked straight, right? They didn't have
now once the seabed rises and the water has nowhere to go, so it has to disperse.
So then the walls, instead of the water dispersing, it became two walls. So the sea really didn't split.
Oh, it split because once the sea rose up, now the water has nowhere to fit into. So the sea is naturally going to start.
Dispersed and separate. Right, it made two walls. So the sea really didn't split.
No, it did split, but it would have split. It would have split. Half of it would have gone into the Pacific Ocean. The other side would have gone to Atlantic Ocean, and it would have been completely a dry land. So what Hashem did was He made these two walls with what? That's where the wind came in. God made the wind blow the whole night. This wondrous wind, it split the waters that were raised up. It put them on both sides of the road. Like two walls. And they stood firm the whole night. Even though it's the nature of water to flow, kamu amdu k'mayneid aydei ruach aza. Says Reb Naftali Vizal, says the Ksav HaKabbalah, according to this, the main miracle is not the splitting of the sea. The main miracle is the rising of the seabed. Hayotze mikol zeh. It comes out she'ikar hanes haya brias haderech hachadash. The main miracle was the creation of the new road she'gava hatahaim lamala, that the seabed rose up. Loi b'kiyas hamayim, but the splitting of the sea was not the main miracle. Ki behechra chuchuchu hamayim liibaka, because the water was compelled to split. V'hapela hasheni, and the second wonder, haya shehamayim hanoisim, that the water that raised up, chitza oisan ruach aza, the strong wind split it, v'hemidan, and stood it up, shlo yizlu kiteveim, that it should not flow as its nature. Says the Ksav HaKabbalah, a wondrous diuk. When it comes to the splitting of the sea, what does it say? Vayibaku hamayim.
Yeah. You gotta tell me when. 11:45. I told Doris. I'm sorry.
Okay. When it comes to the splitting of the sea, what does the pasuk say? Vayibaku. What does that mean? It doesn't say. It doesn't say. 1 second. It doesn't say Moshe split the sea. Vayibaka. Vayibaku. The waters split on their own. It doesn't say an active verb that Moshe split the sea, because he didn't split the sea. You know what Moshe did? He rose up the seabed. The waters then split by itself. That's why it says Vayibaku. Though that happened on its own. That was teva. That was nature. The miracle was the rising of the seabed. Therefore, look what he says: B'lachein nichteva habakia b'lashon nifal. That's why when it comes to the splitting, it uses a lashon nifal. It happened. Shenifku me'elehan.
But what was the purpose of the waters forming a wall? If the waters, if the seabed rose, and the waters would naturally have dispersed, elsewhere in the ocean. Then the Mitzrayim chase after. Kodesh Baruch Hu could have the seabed drop, and they would have drowned anyway. What do we need walls for?
Because Hashem wanted them to drown in the water. So here the water stands up, and as the Mitzrayim come in, the water collapses.
But he could have lowered the seabed. The same way he raised it up as a miracle, according to this Torah. The Egyptians could have been on the fish, and then it would have dropped.
To go faster. They wanted to.
That's how it was done.
They wanted the national
Yeah.
Egyptians to ground it.
They wanted them
the Egyptians so they can cross. And then they say the miracle. Yes. And that's what the other side, they came out.
Which one?
God says to Moshe,
Yeah.
Mati Tzakalei, Matoharim is Matorah, and the Teis Yotva al Hayom Uviko Evu. Yotva al Hayom Uviko Evu.
And split it.
That's an active. That's active, not passive.
I hear.
Why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu write this? I don't believe what Moshe wrote. He was doing it.
Okay.
I need him to tell me a different story.
No, you need to tell him. You need him to tell you the story.
No, but he
No,
tells me a
the
different
Torah
story.
tells the story.
Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know what he's doing.
Moshe did. He's explaining to you how wondrously Moshe wrote the Torah.
What really happened.
What really happened? Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't there. He was there.
The Torah says he put his hand over and he split it.
He's explaining how he split it. Exactly.
But you're saying he's saying
That it split by itself.
Ah, how did it split by itself? Because the seabed. Now, where does it say this? Look carefully. Listen carefully. The pasuk says, "Kafu sahaymais belevyam." What does it mean, kafu? What does kafu mean? The word kafu could have two meanings. The Ksava Kabbalah says. Sometimes the word kafu means to float to the top. For instance, there's a pasuk that says, "Hakofim al shimarehem." That which floats on its sediment. You have the lees in the wine, so they float to the top. So the word kafu could mean float. The word kafu could also mean to congeal or to harden. Like we say cheese, right? There's a pasuk in Tanakh, "V'chagvina takpieni." So the word kafu could mean to become firm, like cheese, or it can mean to float. Says Ksava Kabbalah, you know why the Torah uses the words kafu, sahaymais, belev, yam? Because the Torah wants to convey both meanings over here. Number one, the Tahaim was kafu, it floated to the top. And number two, the Tahaim, which was not solid, became firm. So the words kafu, tahaimais, belev, yam means two things. Number one, the tahaim floated to the top. Number two, the tahaim became firm. So you'll ask, that's not what it says. It says belev yam. And what does lev yam mean? The heart of the sea. And where's the heart of the sea, Rabbi Isai? The heart of the sea, most people would say, in the middle of the ocean is the heart of the sea. Says Ksava Kabbalah, that's a misconception. The Lev Yam has nothing to do with the middle of the sea. You know what Lev Yam means? The surface of the sea. Where do we learn that from? Derech, Aniya, Velev, Yam. The ship travels in the heart of the sea. Where does the ship travel? On the surface. Kafu Sahaimais, the Tahaim became hard and floated to the top. Where? The Lev Yam, to the surface of the sea, to the sea level. That's where we learn this from. Kafu Sahaimais Belev Yam. Says the Ksava Kabbalah, just for an added endorsement, the Vilna Gaon agrees with this explanation in Kriyas Yamsuf, that the sea did not miraculously split. The miracle was the seabed rose, the waters then split by itself, and the second miracle was that the water formed the wall. Says the Ksava Kabbalah, his Rebbe, the Gra, endorses this explanation. Okay, let us proceed.
Ksava Kabbalah was a Talmud of it?
He quotes the Gra very often. I don't know the exact Rebbe disciple relationship, but I think he considers himself a...
It's the early 19th century.
C. Mecklenburg, I believe. Okay, so now that we've learned that the sea did not actually split the way we always thought, at least according to the Ksava Kabbalah, And by the way, other Mefarshim, take a look at a pasuk in Parshas Maseh. Pasuk says, "Vayisu me'esam." It's going through the travels of Bnei Esau. Vayashav al pi achiros, and they encamped by pi achiros ashar pnei Baal Tzefain. Right, they returned there. Vayachanu lefnei Migdal. Vayisu b'pnei achiros. Vayavru b'seich hayam hamidbara. They traveled through the sea to the desert. Vayechol derech shlosh yomim b'midbar esam. They went 3 days. Vayachanu b'mara. So here it's saying the Bnei Yisrael crossed the Yam Suf. This is not a pasuk in this week's Parsha. This is Parshas Maseh. They crossed the Yam Suf. Vayachanu b'mara. Vayisu mimara. What?
It's not Vayavo B'Sochayam, right? Changes from
Okay.
Vayavo. Our whole basis.
No, it doesn't say Vayerdu. The basis was the fact it doesn't say Vayerdu. Okay. Vayisu mimara. They traveled from Mara. Vayavoyu elima. Uve'elim shtemes ve'ein esrayim v'shivim tmarim. In Elim there were 12 springs, 70 palms. Vayachnu sham. Vayisu me'elim. Vayachnu al Yam Suf. So what are they doing back at the Yam Suf? They already crossed the Yam Suf. They crossed the Yam Suf. They traveled 3 days in the Midbar. They came to Mara. They went from Mara to Elim. And they encamped there. They had the water. They had the dates. They traveled from Elim. Now they're back at the Yam Suf. What are they doing back on the Yam Suf?
Could have been in a different place along the shore. The Red Sea has a big shoreline.
Well, instead, they walked through the Yam Suf. The Yam Suf split. And now they're off into the desert. What are they going back for?
I don't know. They didn't go straight anyway. They
What's on
wandered
the
all
other
around.
side of the Yam Suf? More
It
desert.
must have been a 5-star resort there.
So what do they go? What are they staying on the Yam Suf for?
We had a Pesach program here.
What?
How they get to the other side the first time?
If they went through the Yam Suf, then they're well beyond the Yam Suf now. What are they getting? What are they going back? They went to Mara for 3 days. So they're going to Eretz Yisrael, no? So they're going back to the Yam Suf?
They wandered for 40 years.
Not yet. Not yet. They were headed straight to Eretz Yisrael. If you look in Behaloischa, it says in 3 days they would have been there.
They went back before the Yam Suf.
Closer to them.
What?
They went back before the Yam Suf. I'm confused.
Come back for money.
Why'd they go back?
Before they crossed the Yam Suf, they went back towards Mitzrayim.
Fine, but this is after they crossed the Yam Suf.
Afterwards, then they went back where?
Look, it says they crossed the Yam Suf. They went to Mara for 3 days. They went to Elim, and then Nachamal Vayachanu al Yam Suf. What are they going back to the Yam Suf for? That's ancient history. Says.
You know, this
In
map
Elim?
here,
What
right?
was there in Elim? That there was,
What? I don't know what was there. The Shiur tomorrow.
This map here implies, this is from Erechim?
Yeah.
The Gemara talks about this in Erechim?
Tosfos talks about it. Rabbi say something amazing. The Chizkuni, Tosfos, the Ibn Ezra, they all say the following: the Bnei Yisrael never crossed the Yam Suf. So not only was it not a miracle that it split, they never even went through.
Oh, I know what they did. They went in and then they came out on the same side further down.
Says Tosfos asked the question. We once mentioned this in Parshas Maseh, but we didn't have the map. Tosfos says like this: we know when Bnei Yisrael were on the Yam Suf, they said, "Kishem sha'anu ayla mitzad zeh, kach mitzrim ayla mitzad acher." Just like we're coming out, going in on one side, the Egyptians are coming out on the other side. So Tosfos says, "What? Did the Bnei Yisrael? Do you mind closing the door when you?" Tosfos asks what the Bnei Yisrael really thought, that Hashem is going to make a miracle to save them and to have the Mitzrayim go through the Yam Suf also. So then what did Hashem make the miracle for in the first place? If Hashem wants to save their lives by making a miracle and splitting the Yam Suf, what were the Bnei Yisrael thinking? The Bnei Yisrael really thought that they're going to go through the Yam Suf and the Mitzrayim are going to come after them, and this whole miracle not only happened for them but happened for the Mitzrayim so that the Mitzrayim could kill them in the Midbar? Says Tosfos, Bnei Yisrael never crossed the Yam Suf. You know what they did? They did like this. They went into the Yam Suf, the Mitzrayim came in after them, and then they came back out on the same exact side.
12.
They did a chatzi eagle, a half a circle. Right?
What about Yavrumim? Doesn't Yavrumim like cross?
They crossed. Yeah, they crossed in the Yam Suf. But they didn't go all the way through. They didn't travel through the whole length of it, the whole width of it. They went slightly through the length and back out the other side. So you know what the Bnei Yisrael were afraid of? They knew that if they would go into the Yam Suf and God made a miracle, Hashem's not making a miracle for the Egyptians. But maybe there were some Egyptians that wouldn't go into the Yam and remained on the seashore on the same side, waiting for them as they would come out. That's what Bnei Yisrael were afraid of.
Then why didn't they go through the other side?
Yeah.
What?
They were better off going to the other.
That wasn't them. God didn't make that miracle for them. You know why? Because what are you coming on the other side of the Yam Suf? Bnei Yisrael are going to Eretz Yisrael. And if you know anything, you know the Yam Suf is not the border, is not dividing Israel and Egypt. There is no Yam. The Yam Suf is not
on the same side that you started.
So therefore, Taisva says, and the Cheskuni say they never traveled through the Yam Suf. Basically, what they did was, if this is the Yam Suf, they went in a little bit, and they came right back out. They made a chatzi, a half a circle. Or if you look in the picture over here,
This picture is...
it's a difficult picture to comprehend exactly. Basically, what you need to do is you need to turn it like this. You need to turn the picture like this. And Eretz Yisrael being in the north, and Eretz Sichon and Og being in the east side, the Nilos and the Plishtim being in the west, and the Yam Suf in the south. The easy, see where Mitzrayim is? Mitzrayim is southwest of Eretz Yisrael. The easy way would just have been to go through the Eretz Plishtim. But instead they went the most complicated possible way. They went south, away from Eretz Yisrael, slightly into the Yam Suf coming up on the same side.
But Eretz Plishtim is not in the right spot here.
We're going to have to see if we could come up with a better map.
The left side is really the west side.
Yeah.
No, but Plishtim, even if you turn it up, Eretz Yisrael is on the east.
Rabbi say, let's see the Cheskuni inside. Says the Cheskuni, Vayavayu b'nei Yisrael b'soich hayam. Loi she'avru b'nei Yisrael as hayam. The b'nei Yisrael never crossed the sea, al derech rochvan, through the width. Ki yadua, it is known, she'in hayam mafsik bin Eretz Mitzrayim v'in Eretz Canaan. The way to get from Egypt to Israel is not necessarily to go through the Yam Suf. All the Jews had to go into the Yam. It wasn't that they needed to cross the Yam. They just needed to drown the Egyptians. So they went in, the Egyptians followed them, they came out the other side, and the Egyptians drowned. They went in a half circle. What's the raya? The raya is from these psukim in Parshas Maseh. After they crossed the Yam, Rabbi say after they crossed the Yam, and they went to Mara for 3 days, and then they went to Elim. What are they doing back on the Yam Suf? What, they're going backwards? I thought they already crossed the Yam. The answer is they never crossed the Yam. They went in, they went back out, and they're walking along the Yam. No, they never went back. They never went away from the Yam. What?
It was split again?
No, they never crossed it. They never crossed the Yam Suf.
The Egyptians to follow them.
Right.
They never crossed
How
it.
did they get to Eretz Yisrael if they never crossed the Yam?
Through the desert. There is no Yam interfering.
There is a desert.
There's a desert.
Of course there's a Yam.
No, there's not.
No.
The Yam Suf is between Eretz Yisrael unless they cross where the Suez Canal is.
And that's the only
No.
place
Oh, they got borders.
They crossed the Yam Suf only to drown the Egyptians. How did they get into Eretz Yisrael? They went south of Israel, all the way into the lands of Sichon, Og, Edom, and they crossed through the Yarden. But the crossing the Yam Suf?
Crossed through the Yarden?
Yeah.
So they went to Eretz Yisrael and crossed the Eber Yarden?
No, they went circumvented Eretz Yisrael. They went south of the land. They went around Eretz Yisrael. They never crossed through the Yam Suf.
They went around Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael was on the other side of the Yam Suf. They were east.
No, Eretz Yisrael is here. Egypt is here. What did they do? They went south of Israel, up along the east coast of Israel, through the Yarden.
But that's on the other side of the Yam Suf.
No.
Yes. I'll have to look at a map.
Okay.
I need a map.
Sinai.
How did they go? Can you show it again? Here is Egypt.
The Sinai
Here is Israel.
The Sinai is.
This is Eretz Yisrael. This is Mitzrayim.
Yeah.
They left. You have the water south.
Yeah, here there's one, but you don't have. They went south of Eretz Yisrael, back up through the Yarden.
You can't do that. You can't do you have to cross either where the Suez is, or there's water. You cannot go from Mitzrayim to Eretz Yisrael without either crossing the water or going through the land bridge where the Suez Canal is. They told me right.
Where the Suez is now, it's man-made. There was never a...
Okay, Rabbi Sai, let's proceed. Rabbi Sai, let's continue. Let's continue. Says the Cheskuni, that's how you explain the psukim in Parshas Maseh. How? They crossed the Yam Suf, but crossing the Yam Suf does not mean they went through the length of the... They went on the side of the Yam Suf, and even though they were in Mara for 3 days and they were in Elim, they were still Al Hayam. They were still Hayam. Okay, I'll leave you off with 2 questions for Shabbos. Question number 1 is, when did Kriyas Yam Suf happen? During the day or during the night?
It says early in the morning.
The problem is there are 2 psukim. It says, "Vayed Moshe Yadei Al Hayam Vayelech Hashem Asiyam Baruch Kadim Azah Kol Halayla." The wind blew the whole night. Says Rev Meshulam David Halevi Soloveitchik. Rev David Soloveitchik, he's a Rosh Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. He says like this: "Midivrei Hakasav Mashma L'Chayra." From this pasuk, it implies the Kriyas Yamsuf Hoysarak Ba'Bayker V'Loy V'Layla. The Kriyas Yamsuf took place in the morning. It says God let the wind blow the whole night. So that implies, if it blew the whole night, when did Kriyas Yamsuf happen? In the morning. T'chsev Vayelech Hashem Asiyam Baruch Kadam Azah Kol Halayla. V'rak Achar Kachsev Vayibaku Hamayim. Hainu D'chol Halayla Hoysarak Kadim. The whole night the wind blew. V'rak Kishahoyer HaBoiker. But when the sun shone, Nivku Hamayim V'chein Mashim Mehadach Siv L'Karv Zel Zeh Kol Halayla. Right? The pasuk says the Egyptians did not approach Klal Yisrael the whole night, implying that Kriyas Yamsuf did not happen until the morning. Achein Sarachian. But we have the following problem. Zehalon, the pasuk Chav Zayin Kasav. Later on in pasuk Chav Zayin it says, Vayashav Hayam Lefnois Boiker Le'esanai. That in the morning the sea turned back to its strength, and Mitzrayim Nasim L'Krasai. Vayinar Hashem Es Mitzrayim B'Sei Hayam. It says what? That in the morning, the sea went back to its strength, and Mitzrayim is running toward them, and Hashem shook them up, which implies that already in the morning, the sea was split. And the sea only reverted back to form, Lifnais Biker, toward morning. For Rashi says, what does it mean, Lifnais Biker? Le'esh haboker pone lavo. Toward morning means as morning is turning to come, meaning it's not yet morning. So if the sea went back to its original position before the morning,
that means the Kriyas
Yamsuf happened before the morning. So how could it say Hashem made the wind blow the whole night, and only then the sea split?
Maybe because Prophet changed the Teva with the sun or the moon lit it up, or the sun stood still.
I don't know, I wasn't there. You tell me.
We all were there.
Another possibility.
Right? We were all there.
You have a possibility by Mashmoros HaBoker.
Yeah. What happened by Mashmoros HaBoker?
Says
So that implies that it had already split before Ashmar Saboka, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it was the second day. No, that's before the Kriyas Yamsuf. Bayom is Plishtim is before. Rabbi Glatstein.
Yeah.
That pasuk is before Kriyas Yamsuf.
No, it's at Vayinair Hashem.
No, the pasuk that he's quoting, Bayom is Machne Plishtim. Mitzrayim. That's before Kriyas Yamsuf. Shmoras Haboker. So that's the third kasha. That's
Why?
The third kasha.
Why is it third?
Because that's mashma was already boiker when he made the hoofs from the Mitzrayim's susim come off. the Amadeus burned
they got stuck.
They got stuck in the ground.
In the mud.
Okay, so it's hard to put the psukim. On the one hand, it says the sea turned back before the morning. Before the morning, lifnois biker. And on the other hand, the pasuk says the wind blew kol halayla, and only then vayibaku hamayim.
What does it mean? What does this mean?
Look at Rashi.
They're fleeing toward the Jews.
It means
They're fleeing toward the Jews.
Rashi says before the morning.
It seems like it's already split. It seems like the waters are... Okay, Rabbi Sai, one last question. The splitting of the sea in the Chumash is referred to as... No, nowhere in the Chumash does it say Kriyas Yamsuf. Bekia. Vayibaku hamayim. Right? The water is split. Vayibaku hamayim. Okay, that's the lashon the Chumash uses. How about in Tehillim? L'goizer Yamsuf l'gzarim. It's cut. But Chazal choose to use a different language. Kriyas Yamsuf. The tearing of the Yamsuf. Why in the world would they use that expression when it comes to water? You can't tear water. Why would they change the lashon of the pasuk? Parsha says vayibaku. It cracked. The pasuk, the Chazal say, the Tillim says the goyzer yamsuf l'gzarim. And finally, Chazal. Why would Chazal change the language to kriyas yamsuf? So they're in the Sefer Likutei Yehuda, I believe from the grandson of the Chidushei Harim. He says he asked his grandfather, the Chidushei Harim, why would Chazal call it Kriyas Yamsuf? And the Chidushei Harim said the real answer is it's one of the secrets of the Torah. It's one of the Sodos HaTorah why Chazal call it Kriyas Yamsuf. However, Chidushei Harim said, I'll give you a halachic reason. What's the halachic reason? The opinion of the Baal HaTanya, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, is that to be over, to violate Kriya, the malacha of Kaireya on Shabbos, is if you tear a piece of hide, it's not Kriya. It's not considered tearing on Shabbos. It's only considered tearing if there were two things that were separated, and then they were attached, and if you tear it, that's considered Kriya. That's the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch Harav. So therefore, says the Chidushei Harim, you know why Chazal called Kriyas Yamsuf? To teach you that Kriyas Yamsuf did not just happen at that time, but Hashem originally, when He created the world, He made a Tanai, He made a stipulation with the Yam that it should split. So in other words, from the time of Bereshis, it was two parts. So why do Chazal call it Kriyas Yamsuf? To teach you this halacha, that it has the halachic definition of Kriya. How does it have the halachic definition of Kriya? Because it was really two parts that Hashem temporarily put together to be torn apart later. The only problem is, this is not the opinion of the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah argues on the Baal HaTanya. And the Mishnah Berurah holds that even if you tear a piece of hide, it's considered Kriya. Even something that was never two, it was always one entity, it's also Kriya. So according to the Mishnah Berurah, we have to understand why did Chazal choose to call it Kriyas Yamsuf. Rabbi, say have a good Shabbos.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.